Okay, picture this. You're trying to steal 10 grand from a locked iPhone, right in front of the owner. And you don't even know the password. It sounds totally impossible, doesn't it? Well, guess what? It's not a magic trick. This is a real-world hack, and how it all goes down is just wild.
And this is the exact challenge the famous tech YouTuber MKBHD found himself in. He literally hands over his personal, locked iPhone to a team of security researchers. The phone never leaves his sight, okay? It's never unlocked, no password gets entered. And the stakes? Well, they couldn't be any higher. We're talking $10,000. Think about that. A transaction like that should have like layers of security, right? Face ID, a PIN, something. But in this case, all MKBHD does is put his locked phone near this little device. You get this moment of suspense, you hear a chime from the phone, and then?
Approved. Just like that. MKBHD is just stunned. You can see it on his face. A $10,000 charge pops up on his card, time-stamped to that exact moment. He never unlocked his phone. He never verified a single thing. It just worked. The receipt prints and boom, the damage is done.
So the big question is, how on earth is this possible? And here's the crazy part. This isn't some brand new hypothetical threat. Nope, it's a known vulnerability, first shown off way back in 2021, and it still hasn't been fixed. The secret? It all comes down to a classic cybersecurity exploit. It's what's known as a man-in-the-middle attack. Basically, using a special little gadget called a Proxmark, a laptop, and a burner phone, the hackers can just listen in and secretly intercept the communication flying through the air between the iPhone and the payment terminal. But here's the thing, just listening in, that's not enough. To actually pull this heist off, they have to tell a few very, very clever lies.
So, this whole incredible hack, it really just boils down to telling 3 super specific lies. You know, you should think of modern security less like a giant wall and more like a series of digital tripwires. And this hack, it works by just cleverly sidestepping each one, tricking both the phone and the payment terminal to get what it wants.
All right, so let's break it down. Lie number 1 is all about bypassing the lock screen. The attacker's device basically pretends it's a subway gate. This kicks the iPhone to Apple's Express Transit mode, you know, the one designed for super quick, unlock-free payments. Then comes lie number 2. This one tricks the phone into thinking that that huge $10,000 charge is actually a low-value payment. And they do this by flipping a single bit of data, literally changing a 1 to a 0. That stops the phone from even asking for a PIN or Face ID. And finally, the third lie is told to the payment reader. The attacker intercepts the phone's reply and flips another bit, which tells the reader, yep, the user totally verified this payment, even though, of course, they didn't. It's kind of brilliant, and it shows how a few tiny changes in data can cause a massive security failure.
Now, this is really important to understand. This isn't some universal flaw that affects everyone. No, it's more like a perfect storm, a tiny loophole that only opens up when you have a very specific phone combined with a very specific type of credit card. So first off, the phone has to be an iPhone, and you might be asking why. Well, it's because when an iPhone is in that express transit mode, it just trusts the reader to tell it if a transaction is high value or low value. It doesn't bother to check the actual dollar amount itself. A Samsung phone, on the other hand, does check the amount. It would see a $10,000 request coming from a supposed transit gate and would shut it down immediately, no questions asked. And second, the card has to be a Visa. See, MasterCard's system uses something called asymmetric cryptography. The best way to think of it is like a wax seal on an old letter. If anyone messes with the message inside, that seal breaks and everybody knows it's been tampered with. The transaction? Instantly blocked. But Visa makes this digital seal optional. And in this very specific situation, it's not being used, which leaves the message wide open for the hacker to change.
So, you gotta be thinking, if this thing has been known about for years, why in the world hasn't it been fixed? Well, that, my friends, leads us to a bit of a standoff between 2 of the biggest companies on the planet.
When you ask Apple about this hack, they point the finger right at Visa. Their official statement pretty much says this is a problem with the Visa system. They're basically saying, hey, that's their problem to fix, not ours. And then they also add that, you know, Visa's own policies protect you from fraudulent charges anyway. But then you go to Visa, and they kind of downplay the whole thing. They argue that this type of attack is super unlikely to happen out in the real world, especially not on a large scale. And, just like Apple mentioned, they stress that if it does happen to you, you can just dispute the charge and get your money back.
Okay, so what does all this mean for you and me?
With these two giants just pointing fingers at each other, where does that leave the rest of us? I mean, should you actually be worried about this?
All right, here's what you need to know. The flaw is absolutely real, and no, it hasn't been patched. That express transit mode feature that makes this whole thing possible, it's often turned on by default whenever you add a card to your Apple Wallet. You can actually go into your phone's settings right now to see if it's active. So look, the most direct way to protect yourself from this specific attack is pretty simple. Just don't use a Visa card as your express transit card. Now, just to put this all into perspective, Visa says that for every $100 spent in person with their cards, only about 2 cents are lost to fraud. So from where they're sitting, this one specific kind of complicated hack is just a tiny, tiny drop in a massive ocean of transactions. And this whole situation creates something a lot like the fear of flying, right? Statistically, the risk is incredibly low. You are way more likely to be a victim of some other, much more common type of fraud. But just imagine for a second waking up and seeing a fraudulent $10,000 charge on your account. The fact that it's rare doesn't make the very real stress and panic you'd feel in that moment any less intense.
And that leaves us with one last really crucial question. We live in a world where our finances are almost completely digital, and we have to rely on companies like Apple and Visa to keep our money safe. So when a flaw like this is found, is it really good enough for them to just say, the risk is low and you'll get your money back eventually? Or should we be able to expect them to proactively fix the problem, no matter how unlikely it is that someone will exploit it? That's definitely something to think about.